Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hot Dad Reads. We're reading Les Miserables, which feels appropriate for the 4th of July. With that, I have a little quote from our friend Aaron Sorkin at the West Wing. Of course, the math here doesn't add up anymore, but 227 years ago, a bunch of guys got together on the 4th of July and decided, because they didn't have any cherry bombs, they would declare some self-evident truths. And that's fun. And because of that, I get to spend the rest of the day wondering while they're, exploding the street outside, whether or not it's going to wake up my baby. So I'm excited for that. But we've got Les Miserables to read. We got chapter 4 of part 1, book 1. And let's dive in. Monsignor Bienvenu made his cassocks last far too long. Monsignor Muriel's private life was filled with the same thoughts as his public life. To anyone able to see at a close hand, the voluntary poverty in which the Bishop of Digne lived would have been a dignified and charming spectacle. Like all old men and most thinkers, he slept little. This brief sleep was a deep sleep. In the morning he meditated for an hour, then said Mass, either at the cathedral or in his private chapel. Once he had said Mass, he breakfasted on rye bread dipped in milk from his own cows. Then he worked. A bishop is a very busy man. Every day he has to see the diocesan secretary, generally a canon, and nearly every day his vicars general. He has congregations to supervise, privileges to grant, a whole library full of ecclesiastical publications to study, prayer books, diocesan catechisms, books of hours, etc., newsletters to write, sermons to approve, parish priests and mayors to bring together, a clerical correspondence and administrative correspondence with the state on one hand and the Holy See on the other, countless matters to be dealt with. Whatever time was left to him by these countless matters, his religious services and his breviary, he gave first of all to the needy, the sick, and the bereaved. Whatever time was left to him by the bereaved, the sick, and the needy, he devoted to work. Sometimes he dug the soil in his garden, sometimes he read or wrote. For both these kinds of work he had just one word. He called this gardening. The mind is a garden, he used to say. At midday he had his lunch. Lunch was the same as breakfast. At around 2 o'clock, when the weather was fine, he would go for a walk in the countryside or in town, often entering the humblest dwellings. He was to be seen walking by himself, entirely absorbed in his thoughts, with his eyes on the ground, leaning on his long walking stick, dressed in his very warm purple quilted coat, purple stockings and heavy shoes, and wearing his flat hat with 3 gold-braided tassels dangling from its 3 corners. There was celebration wherever he appeared. He seemed to bring something bright and warming with him as he went by. Children and old folk came out on the doorstep for the bishop as if for the sun. He gave his blessing, and they blessed him. Anyone in need of anything was directed to his house. He would stop there and here, talk to the little boys and girls, and smile at their mothers. As long as he had money, he visited the poor. When he had none left, he visited the rich. Since he made his cassocks last a very long time, and did not want anyone to notice, he never went into town without his purple quilted coat. This was a little uncomfortable in the summer. At 8:30 in the evening, he had supper with his sister, with Madame Magloire standing behind them and serving them at table. Nothing could be more frugal than this meal. If, however, the bishop had one of his parish priests to supper, Madame Magloire took advantage of the opportunity to serve Monseigneur some excellent lake water fish or some choice game from the mountains. Every parish priest was an excuse for a good meal. The bishop did not interfere. Otherwise, his usual meal consisted only of boiled vegetables and a soup with oil. Consequently, it was said in town, when the bishop does not dine like a parish priest, he dines like a Trappist monk. After supper, he would chat for half an hour with Mademoiselle Baptistine and Madame Magloire, then retire to his own room and begin writing again, sometimes on loose pages, sometimes in the margin of a folio volume. He was well read and somewhat erudite. He has left 5 or 6 rather curious manuscripts, among others a dissertation on the verse from Genesis, "In the beginning the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." He compares this verse with 3 texts. The Arabic version that says, "The winds of God blew." Flavius Josephus, who said, Flavius Josephus, who says, "A wind from on high came down upon the earth." And finally, Onkelos paraphrased it in Chaldaic as, "A wind emanating from God blew upon the face of the waters." In another dissertation, he examines the theological works of Hugo, Bishop of Ptolemy, great-great-uncle of the author of this book. Didn't know you could do that. And establishes that the various tracts published during the last century under the pseudonym of Barleycourt are to be attributed to this bishop. Can you just break the fourth wall like that in a book that easily? It's Les Miserables. I was not expecting that. As a fun aside, I understand in the Greek, I might have this wrong, but when it talks about the Spirit of God over the waters of creation, it's brooding over the waters, which is something like a mother bird would do, like over its chicks. It's brooding. It's very protective and loving and nurturing and whatnot. It's a fun image. Sometimes in the middle of reading, no matter what the book he had in his hand might be, he would suddenly fall into a deep meditation, emerging from it only to write a few lines on the actual pages of the book. These lines often have no connection whatsoever with the book that contains them. We have now before our eyes a note written by him in the margin of a quarto volume entitled "Correspondence of Lord Germain with Generals Clinton, Cornwallis, and the Admirals of the American Station, Versailles, Poinco, bookseller, and Paris, Pissot, bookseller, Croix de Augustin." This is the note. "Oh, you who are. Ecclesiastes names you Almighty. The Maccabees name you Creator. The Epistle to the Ephesians names you Freedom. Baruch names you Immensity. The Psalms name you Wisdom and Truth. John names you Light. The Book of Kings names you Lord. Exodus names you Providence. Leviticus, Sanctity. Esdras, Justice. Creation names you God. Mankind names you Father. But Solomon names you Mercy. And of all your names, this is the most beautiful." About 9 o'clock in the evening, the 2 women would retire and go up to their rooms on the first floor, leaving him alone on the ground floor until morning. Yeah. When I was in London, you get in the elevator. The first floor is 1 story up. There's the ground floor, and then first floor, second floor, third floor. Whereas in America, the ground floor is the first floor. If I were to walk upstairs, I'd be going to my second floor, not my first floor. And the fans are turning on. That's annoying. I'm going to turn those off. I'll be right back. Wait like 3 minutes for them to go. Oh, you wanted us off. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Why, hello. At this point, we need to give an accurate idea of the Bishop of Dinay's accommodation. That's a way to end a chapter. Wow. Chapter 6. Under whose protection he placed his house. The house where he lived consisted, as we have said, of a ground floor and a first floor. 3 rooms on the ground floor, 3 on the first, with an attic above. Behind the house was a garden of some quarter of an acre. The two women occupied the first floor. The bishop slept downstairs. The first room, which opened onto the street, served as his dining room. The second was his bedroom, and the third his private chapel. There was no way out of this chapel except through the bedroom, or out of the bedroom except through the dining room. At the far end of the chapel was a separate alcove with a bed in it for the use of guests. The bishop would offer this bed to priests brought to Dinay by the needs of their rural parishes or on other business. The hospital pharmacy, a small building added to the house and extending into the garden, had been turned into a kitchen and storeroom. There was also in the garden an outbuilding, formerly the old hospital kitchen, where the bishop kept 2 cows. However much milk they gave, he invariably sent half of it every morning to the patients in the hospital. "I'm paying my tithes," he said. His bedroom was quite big and quite difficult to hear in winter. As wood is extremely expensive in Dinay, he came up with the idea of having a wooden partition installed in the cowshed to create a separate closet. Here he spent his evenings when it was very cold. He called it his winter drawing room. This drawing room had no other furniture than a square white wood table and 4 straw-bottomed chairs, as in the dining room. The dining room also boasted an old sideboard painted with pink distemper. Out of a similar sideboard, appropriately draped with white cloths and imitation lace, the bishop had fashioned the altar that graced his chapel. His wealthy penitents and the pious women of Dinay had often contributed to a fund to pay for the expense of a new altar for Monsignor's chapel. Every time this happened, he had taken the money and given it to the poor. "The most beautiful of altars," he said, "is the soul of one comforted in their distress who thanks God." There were 2 straw-bottomed chairs with kneelers in his chapel, and an armchair, also straw-bottomed, in his bedroom. When he happened to have 7 or 8 guests at the same time, the prefect or the general, or the officers of the regiment and garrison, or several pupils from the seminary school, someone had to go and fetch the chairs from the winter drawing room in the cowshed, the chairs with kneelers from the chapel, and the armchair from the bedroom. As many as 11 chairs could be thus assembled for visitors. With every new arrival, a room was emptied of furniture. It sometimes happened they were 12 in all. The bishop then disguised the awkwardness of the situation by standing in front of the chimney if it was winter, or suggesting a stroll in the garden if it was summer. There was yet another chair in the alcove, but the straw bottom was half giving way, and it was balanced on only 3 legs, which meant it could only be used propped up against the wall. Mademoiselle Baptiste Dinay also had in her room a very large bergeret of wood that had once been gilt and upholstered in a flower-patterned Peking silk. But this bergeret had to be brought up to the first floor through the window, as the staircase was too narrow, so it could not be included among the furniture available when needed. Mademoiselle Baptiste Dinay's ambition had been to buy a suite of drawing-room furniture, including a sofa in a yellow rose-patterned Utrecht velvet and mahogany, with swan neck carvings. But this would have cost 500 francs at least, and seeing that she had been able to save up only 42 francs and 10 sous in 5 years, She eventually gave up the idea. Anyway, whoever attains their ideal. Nothing could be simpler to visualize than the bishop's bedroom. A French window opening onto the garden, with the bed facing it. A hospital bed, iron-framed with a green serge canopy. Close to the bed, behind a curtain, the toilet articles that still betrayed the old stylish ways of the man of the world. 2 doors, one by the fireplace leading to the chapel, the other by the bookcase leading to the dining room. The bookcase, a large glass-fronted cabinet full of books. The fireplace, with a wooden mantel painted to look like marble, usually without a fire. In the fireplace, a pair of andirons? Yeah. In the fireplace, a pair of andirons decorated with 2 garlanded vases and flutings, once silver-plated, which was a kind of episcopal luxury. Above, where a mirror would normally be hung, a crucifix made of copper, with the silver plating worn off, set against threadbare black velvet in a wooden frame that had lost its gilt. By the French window, a large table with an inkstand laden with a jumble of papers and some thick volumes. In front of the table, the straw-bottomed armchair. In front of the bed, a chair with kneeler, borrowed from the chapel. Hanging on the wall on either side of the bed were 2 portraits in oval frames. Small gilt inscriptions on the plain cloth background. Beside these heads indicated that one of the portraits was the Abbé de Chauliac, Bishop of Saint-Claude, the other of Abbé Tortot, Vicar General of Agde, Abbot of Grand Champ of the Cistercian order in the Diocesan of Chartres. When the bishop took over this room from the hospital patients, he found these portraits in it and had left them there. They were priests, probably benefactors. 2 reasons why he should respect them. All he knew about these 2 individuals was that they had been appointed. The one to his bishopric, the other to his living, by the king on the same day, the 27th of April, 1785. The bishop discovered this information, written in faded ink on a little square of paper, yellowed with age and attached with 4 blobs of sealing wax, to the back of the portrait of the abbot of Grand Champ, when Madame Magloire took the pictures down to shake the dust off them. Should I say Madame Magloire? Madame. It's Madame, probably. I don't know. He had a very old window curtain of coarse woolen cloth that eventually became so old that to avoid the expense of a new one, Madame Magloire was obliged to sew a large patch right in the middle of it. This patch was in the shape of a cross. The bishop often remarked on it. "How well that looks," he would say. All the rooms in the house, without exception, on the ground floor, as well as on the first, were whitewashed, which is a common practice in barracks and hospitals. However, as we shall see, underneath the whitewashed paper, Madame Magloire had recently discovered paintings that decorated Mademoiselle Baptistine's room. Before it was a hospital, this house had been the town council building. Hence the decoration. The bedroom floors were of red brick, washed every week, with a woven straw mat before every bed. Indeed, this place, looked after by 2 women, was immaculately clean from top to bottom. This was the sole luxury the bishop allowed. He said, "It takes nothing from the poor." It must be acknowledged, though, that of his former possessions, he was still left with 6 silver forks and spoons, and a large soup ladle, that for Madame Magloire were a daily joy to see gleaming splendidly on the white linen tablecloth. And as we are painting a portrait of the Bishop of Digne, just as he said, we must add that he had more than once been heard to say, "It would be hard to give up eating off silver." To this silverware must be added 2 large candlesticks of solid silver that he had inherited from a great aunt. These candlesticks held 2 wax candles and usually stood on the bishop's mantelpiece. When he had someone to dinner, Madame Magloire would light the 2 candles and set the candlesticks on the table. In the bishop's own bedroom, at the head of his bed, was a small cupboard in which Madame Magloire locked away the 6 silver forks and spoons and the large ladle every evening. It has to be said the key was never removed. A little spoiled by the rather ugly outhouses mentioned above, the garden consisted of 4 paths that formed a cross, radiating from a drainage well. Another path ran all the way around the garden and along the white wall that enclosed it. These paths marked out 4 square plots edged with box. In 3 of these, Madame Magloire grew vegetables. In the 4th, the bishop had planted flowers. Here and there were a few fruit trees. Madame Magloire had once said to him with a sort of gentle mockery, "Monseigneur is always one for putting everything to good use, but this is a waste of a plot. It would be more useful to have salads here than bunches of flowers." "Madame Magloire," replied the bishop, "you are mistaken. The beautiful is just as useful as the useful." He added after a pause, "Perhaps more so." This plot, consisting of 3 or 4 flower beds, occupied the bishop almost as much as his books. Oh, my leg is asleep. We're going to do this dance. Here we go. He would gladly spend an hour or 2 at them, pruning, weeding, and making holes in the ground here and there in which he put seeds. He was not as hostile to insects as a gardener might have wished. Indeed, he had no botanical pretensions at all. He knew nothing of groups and solidism. He was not in the least concerned with deciding between tourneforts and the natural method. He did not favor utricles over cotyledons, who knows, or Jussieu over Linnaeus. He did not study plants. He loved flowers. He had a great deal of respect for the learned. He had even more respect for the uneducated, and without ever failing in his respect for both, he watered his flower beds every summer evening with a green tin watering can. The house had not a single door that could be locked. The door of the dining room, which, as we have said, opened directly onto the cathedral square, had formerly been fitted with locks and bolts like a prison door. The bishop had all these iron fittings removed, and day or night this door was always left on the latch. No matter what time it was, anyone that called had only to push it open. At first, the 2 women had fretted greatly about the door that was never locked, but the Bishop of Digne said to them, "Have bolts fitted to your rooms if you like." They ended up sharing his trustfulness, or at least behaving as if they did. Madame Magloire alone had frights from time to time. As for the bishop, an explanation of his thinking, or at least a clue to it, can be found in a few lines he wrote in the margin of a Bible. "There is a subtle distinction to be made. The doctor's door should never be shut. The priest's door should always be open." On another book, entitled Philosophy of Medical Science, he had written this note: "Am I not a physician like them? I too have my patients. In the first place, I have theirs, whom they call the sick, and then I have mine, whom I call those in distress." Elsewhere he wrote, "Don't ask the name of anyone that asks you for shelter. It is especially the person whose name is a burden to him that has need of shelter." It so happened that a well-meaning priest, the parish priest of Coulebreux or Pompieri, I don't remember which, one day took it upon himself, probably at Madame Magloire's instigation, to ask whether Monseigneur was quite sure he was not acting a little unwisely in leaving his door open day and night to anyone that might choose to enter, and whether he did not after all fear some harm might come to those in a house so poorly guarded. The bishop touched him on the shoulder with gentle solemnity and said, "Nisi Dominus custodierat domum, in vanum vigilant, qui custodiant eam." Then he spoke of something else. This is Psalm 127. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. He was fond of saying, "There's the bravery of the priest as well as the bravery of a colonel of dragoons. Only," he added, "ours must be a bravery of peace." And then I drink water. And then I burp. That's just how this goes. Hey, if you're watching this, have you hit the follow button? And twitch.tv/HotDadReads. There's like a follow button, a little heart or something. You click, and then it's like, hey, do you want to be notified? And if you want to be notified, sure. But if you don't want to be notified, click no. But if you hit that little heart and you follow me, we're at like 22 or 24 now. If we get to 50, I can start to monetize this, which means I'm taking money from Jeff Bezos. Help me out here. And if you want to give me money, hey, patreon.com/HotDadReads. Bunch of levels there. But we're having a lot of fun. Gets you access, if you're at the right level, to all of the books we've already read. That includes Pride and Prejudice, War of the Worlds. You get access to the super secret Saturday Shakespeare streams. And all of those are also archived on there, so you can get all of Much Ado About Nothing and what are we reading right now? Julius Caesar. We've got Acts 4 and 5 still to come. There's the burp. We can keep reading now. So yeah, check it out. Patreon.com/HotDadReads. Chapter 7. Is that cravat? I've heard the word. I've just never seen the word. Let's say it's cravat. This is the right place to recount an event we must not fail to mention, because it is one of those that best illustrate what kind of man the Bishop of Digne was. After the rout of Gaspard Bey's gang that had infested the Olioz gorges, one of his lieutenants, Cravat, took refuge in the mountains. With his outlaws, the remnants of Gaspard Bey's band, it's French, it's B-E-S, so, it's probably, the S isn't pronounced, but it's the ownership of it, so it's B-E-S''S. So, Bey's band? I don't know. With his outlaws, the remnants of Gaspard Bey's band, he went into hiding for a while in the country of Nice. Nice. Then made his way to Piedmont, and suddenly reappeared in France in the vicinity of Barcelonnette. He was first seen at Yazers? Sure. Then at Toulouse. I am so sorry. He hid in the caves of Jeu de l'Aigle, and from there would descend on the hamlets and villages following the course of the Ubaye and the Oubliette. He even ventured as far as Embrun, entered the cathedral one night, and ransacked the sacristy. His depredations were the despair of the locality. The gendarmerie were sent after him, but to no avail. He always escaped. Sometimes he put up a fight. He was a bold wretch. The bishop turned up at his pastoral round in the middle of this terror. At Chastelet, the mayor came out to meet him and urged him to turn back. Cravat had control of the mountains as far as Arca. Acre? No. Archie? Sure. As far as Arca and beyond. It was dangerous even with an escort, which only meant needlessly putting 3 or 4 poor gendarmes at risk. Which is why, said the bishop, I intend to go without an escort. Are you serious, Monseigneur? Exclaimed the mayor. So serious that I don't want a single gendarme, and I'm leaving within the hour. Leaving? Leaving? Alone? Alone? Monseigneur, you can't do that. Up in the mountains, said the bishop, is the smallest of humble communities, which I haven't visited for 3 years. They're my dear friends, gentle and honest shepherds. They own 1 goat out of every 30 they tend. They make very pretty woolen cords of various colors, and they play mountain airs on little 6-hole flutes. They need someone to tell them about the good Lord from time to time. What would they think of a bishop who was scared? What would they think if I didn't go to them? But the brigands, Monsignor, what if you were to run into the brigands? Well, said the bishop, I have been thinking about that. You're right, I may run into them. They too need someone to tell them about the good Lord. But Monsignor, they're a gang, a pack of wolves. Monsieur le Maire, it may be that this very pack of wolves is the flock Jesus is placing in my pastoral care. Who understands the ways of providence? Monsignor, they'll rob you. It's not Monsieur le Maire, it's Monsieur le Maire. See, now I'm finally hearing, like, the French in the musical. But Monsieur le Maire, Monsieur Maire. Interesting. Monsignor, they'll rob you. I have nothing. They'll kill you. A harmless old priest mumbling his prayers as he goes by. Pah! What for? Oh, my goodness. If you were to run into them, I'd ask them to give to the poor. For heaven's sake, don't go, Monsignor. You're endangering your life. But if that's the only objection, Monsieur le Maire, said the bishop, I'm not in this world to protect my life, but to protect souls. There was no way of stopping him. He set out, accompanied only by a child who offered to serve as his guide. His stubborn determination caused a stir among the local people and greatly alarmed them. He would take with him neither his sister nor Madame Magloire. He crossed the mountain on a mule, encountered no one, and came safe and sound to his good friends the shepherds. He remained with them for a fortnight, preaching, administering the sacraments, teaching, edifying. When he was soon to depart, he resolved to sing a solemn Te Deum. He told the parish priest, but how was it to be done? No episcopal vestments. All that could be placed at his disposal was a lowly village sacristy with a few old chasubles of threadbare damask trimmed with imitation braid. Bah, said the bishop. Let's proclaim our Te Deum from the pulpit anyway. Something will turn up. A search of the local churches was made. All the finery of these humble parishes put together would not have provided suitable vestments for one cathedral chorister. While they were in this quandary, a large chest was brought and left in the presbytery for the bishop by 2 unknown horsemen, who immediately rode off again. The chest was opened. It contained a cope of cloth of gold, a mitre ornamented with diamonds, an archbishop's cross, a magnificent crozier, all the pontifical vestments stolen a month previously from the treasury of Notre Dame d'Embrun. In the chest was a piece of paper with the words written on it, "From Cravat to Monseigneur Bienvenu." Did I not say something would turn up? Said the bishop. Then he added with a smile, "To him who is satisfied with a priest's surplice, God sends the cope of an archbishop." "Monseigneur," murmured the parish priest, nodding with a smile. "God or the devil." The bishop looked steadily at the priest and corrected him with authority. God. When he returned to Chastellar, and all along the way, people came to see him out of curiosity. He found Mademoiselle Baptistine and Madame Magloire waiting for him at the presbytery in Chastellar, and he said to his sister, "Well, I was right, wasn't I? The poor priest went to visit those poor mountain dwellers empty-handed, and he comes home with his hands full. I set out with only my trust in God. I'm bringing back a cathedral's treasury." And after And that evening, before he went to bed, he said, "Never fear robbers or murderers. Those are dangers that come from without. Small dangers. Let us fear ourselves. Prejudices are the real robbers. Vices are the real murderers. The great dangers are within us. Never mind what endangers our life or our purse. Let's be mindful only of what endangers our soul." Then turning to his sister, "Sister, no priest should ever guard himself against his fellow man. Whatever his fellow man does, God allows it. Let us simply pray to God when we believe some danger threatens us, and pray not for ourselves, but that our brother may not fall into sin on our account." That apart, his life was usually uneventful. We relate what we know of, but generally, he spent his life always doing the same things at the same time of day. 1 month of his year was like 1 hour of his day. As to what became of the Cathedral of Embrun treasure, being questioned on that subject would embarrass us. Very handsome indeed were those things, very tempting, and very good to steal for the benefit of the poor. Anyway, they were already stolen. The job was half done. The theft only needed to be redirected and helped a little on its way to reach the poor. However, we are not making any assertions in this regard. Only a rather obscure note was found among the bishop's papers that may have some bearing on this matter. It is worded as follows: "The question is whether it should revert to the cathedral or the hospital." Chapter 8. After Drinking Philosophy. The senator we have spoken of earlier was a calculating man who had made his way regardless of all those obstacles he would have encountered that we call conscience, solemn oath, justice, duty. He had moved straight towards his goal without once faltering in the pursuit of his career and his self-interest. He was a former prosecutor with a weakness for success, not at all a wicked man, doing all the little favors he could for his sons-in-law, relations, even friends, having wisely taken from life its good aspects, its good opportunities, its strokes of good luck. Anything else seemed rather foolish to him. He was witty and just sufficiently well read to consider himself a disciple of Epicurus, while in reality being only a product of Pigault Lebrun. He joked readily and pleasantly about things infinite and everlasting, and about the dear bishop's nonsense. Sometimes he even joked about these with a kindly authority when Monsieur Myriel himself was there listening. Some semi-official ceremony or other that Comte the name is blanked out. This senator and Monsieur Myriel were both dinner guests of the prefect. When it came to dessert, the senator, a little merry, though still dignified, cried, "Dash it, Monsieur l'Evêque, let's have a chat. It's hard for a senator and a bishop to look at each other without winking. We're both augurs. I'm going to be honest with you. I have my philosophy." "Quite right, too," replied the bishop. "As you make your philosophical bed, so must you lie in it. Yours is the bed of purple, Monsieur le Sénateur." Encouraged, the senator went on. "Let's be good-natured about this." "Devilish good-natured, even," said the bishop. "I tell you," continued the senator, "the Marquis d'Argens, Pirot, Hobbes, and Monsieur Nagion are no scoundrels. All the philosophers I have in my library are gilt-edged." "Like yourself, Monsieur le Comte," the bishop interposed. The senator went on. "I hate Diderot. He's an ideologue, a ranter, and a revolutionary who basically believes in God and is more sanctimonious than Voltaire. Voltaire scoffed at Needham, and he was wrong, for Needham's eels prove that God is unnecessary. A drop of vinegar and a spoonful of flour paste replaces the fiat lux. An allusion to Genesis 1:3. Dixitque Deus fiat lux et facta lux est. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Suppose the drop were larger and the spoonful bigger, and there you have the world. Man is the eel, so what use is the eternal Father? The Jehovah hypothesis bores me, Monsieur Levesque. All it can do is produce people of no substance who ring hollow. Down with the great whole that drives me to distraction. Long live nothingness that leaves me alone. Between you and me, and to come clean and confess to my pastor as one should, I admit I have common sense. I'm not mad about this Jesus of yours who's constantly preaching self-denial and sacrifice, a miser's counsel to the poverty-stricken. Self-denial? Why? Sacrifice for what? I don't see any wolf sacrificing itself for the sake of another wolf's happiness. So let's stick with nature. We hold pride of place. Let's have the superior philosophy. What's the point of being on top if you can't see further than the end of other people's noses? Let's enjoy life. Life is all. The idea that man has another future elsewhere, up above, down below, wherever, I don't believe a single word of it. Oh, I'm told to make sacrifices and be self-denying. I must beware of everything I do. I have to worry about good and evil, right and wrong, the fa and the nepha. Latin, fa, that which is in accordance with divine law, and nepha, that which is contrary to it. Why? Because I should be called to account for my actions. When? After my death. What a charming fantasy. After my death, it would take a lot of cunning to nab me. Just you make a disembodied hand grab a handful of dust. Let's speak the truth. We who are among the initiated and have lifted Isis's skirt, there is neither good nor evil. There's vegetation. Let us seek out reality. Delve deep. Dig to the bottom, damn it. You have to sniff out the truth, burrow underground and snatch it up. Then it gives you exquisite pleasure. Then you become strong and you laugh. I've got my feet on the ground. Monsieur Levesque, the immortality of man is wishful thinking. Oh, what a delightful promise. Believe it if you will. What an assurance Adam has been given. We're souls. We're going to become angels. We'll have blue wings on our shoulder blades. Help me out here. Isn't it Tertullian who says that the blessed will migrate from star to star? Very well. We shall be grasshoppers among the stars. And then we shall see God, blah, blah, blah. All these paradises are just twaddle. God is a monstrous piece of nonsense. I wouldn't say so in Le Moniteur, of course, but I whisper it among friends. Inter pocula, Latin, in one's cups. To sacrifice the world for paradise is to let go the substance for the shadow. Be taken in by the everlasting? I'm not such a fool. I'm nothing. I call myself Monsieur le Comte of Nothingness, Senator. Did I exist before my birth? No. Shall I exist after my death? No. What am I? A little dust bound together by an organism. What am I to do on this earth? I have the choice, to suffer or to enjoy myself. Where will suffering get me? To non-existence. But I shall have suffered. Where will enjoyment get me? To non-existence. But I shall have enjoyed myself. My choice is made. Of necessity, it is either eat or be eaten. I shall eat. Better to be the tooth than the grass. Such is my wisdom. After that, however long you manage to keep going, the grave digger is there, the pantheon for some of us, but all end up in the great hole in the ground. The end. Finis. Total elimination. This is the vanishing point. Death is final, believe me. I laugh at the idea of there being anyone who has anything to tell me on this subject. Nursery make-believe, the boogeyman for children, Jehovah for adults. No, our future is darkness. Beyond the tomb, there's nothing but equal non-existences. Whether you were Sardanapalus or Vincent de Paul, it makes no difference. That's the truth of the matter. So above all, live your life. Make use of yourself while it's yours. Monsieur Levesque, I tell you truly, I have my philosophy, and I have my philosophers. I don't allow myself to be inveigled by humbug. Of course, there must be something for those at the bottom of society, the barefoot tramps, the ones living on a pittance, the wretched poor. They're given legends to swallow, chimeras, the soul, immortality, paradise, the stars. They chew on that. They put it on their dry crusts. Whoever has nothing has the good Lord. That's the very least he deserves. I've no objection to that, but I keep Monsieur Negin for myself. The good Lord is good enough for the populace. The bishop clapped his hands. Well said, he exclaimed. What an excellent and truly marvelous thing that kind of materialism is. It takes more than wanting to come by it, but when you do, you're no longer fooled. You don't stupidly allow yourself to be exiled like Cato, or stoned like Stephen, or burned alive like Joan of Arc. Those that do manage to avail themselves of this admirable materialism have the pleasure of feeling irresponsible and of thinking they can gobble up everything without worrying. Positions, sinecures, distinctions, power, whether honestly or dishonestly come by, lucrative retractions, advantageous betrayals, delectable compromises with their conscience, and that they shall go to their graves having digested the lot. How satisfying. I don't say this for your sake, Monsieur le Sénateur. However, I can only congratulate you. You, fine gentlemen, as you say, have a philosophy of your own for yourselves. An exquisite, refined philosophy available only to the rich, to be served up in all kinds of ways, wonderfully adding relish to the pleasures of life. This philosophy is extracted from the hidden depths and unearthed by expert seekers. But you are kindly princes, and you don't mind that belief in God should be the philosophy of the people, rather in the same way that goose stuffed with chestnuts is the truffled turkey of the poor. Need to check the time. Yeah, we got enough time for another chapter, I think. That was a large paragraph. That was just a monologue. That was a 2-page long monologue. Pardon me. Chapter 9, The Brother as Described by His Sister. To give some idea of the Bishop of Dinay's domestic arrangements, and of the way those two saintly women subordinated their actions, thoughts, even their instincts, easily frightened as they were, to the habits and wishes of the bishop, without his even having to take the trouble to say anything to convey them, we can do no better than to transcribe at this point a letter from Mademoiselle Baptiste Dinay to her childhood friend, Madame la Vicomtesse de Bochevron. We have the letter in our hands. Dinay, 16th December, 18 My dear Madam, not a day passes that we do not speak of you. This is something of a habit of ours, but there is yet another reason for it. Just imagine, while washing and dusting the ceilings and walls, Madame Magloire has made some discoveries. Our 2 bedrooms, with old whitewashed paper on the walls, would now not discredit a chateau like yours. Madame Magloire has pulled off all the paper. There was something underneath. My drawing room, containing no furniture, that we use for hanging out the linen after it has been washed, is 15 foot high by 18 foot square, with what was once a painted gilded ceiling with beams like yours. It was concealed under baize from the days when this was the hospital. Would you believe wooden coffering from our grandmother's day? But you should see my room. Under at least 10 layers of paper pasted over them, Madame Magloire has discovered some paintings that, without being good, are passable. Of Telemachus being knighted by Minerva, and of him again in the gardens. The name escapes me. You know where Roman ladies would go on just one night. What shall I say? I have Romans, men, women, an illegible word here. The comment in brackets is Hugo's. Interesting. And all the rest. Madame Magloire has cleaned it all up. And this summer, she is going to have some slight damage repaired, and the whole thing revarnished, and the room will be a veritable museum. She has also found, in a corner of the attic, 2 old-fashioned wooden console tables. It would have cost us 12 francs to have them regilded, but it is much better to give the money to the poor. In any case, they are very ugly, and I would far rather have a round mahogany table. I am just as happy as ever. My brother is so good. He gives all he has to the poor and the sick. Life is very difficult. The winters are hard in this part of the world, and we really have to do something for those in need. We are fairly well provided with heat and lighting. You see, such things are great luxuries. My brother has his own ways. In conversation, he says this is how a bishop should be. Would you believe the door of our house is never locked? Anyone can walk in, straight into my brother's rooms. He is not afraid of anything, even at night. That is his form of bravery, he says. He does not want me or Madame Magloire to fear for his safety. He exposes himself to all kinds of danger, and he does not even want us to look as if we notice. We must be understanding. He goes out in the rain, walks in the wet, travels in winter. He is not afraid of the dark or of dangerous roads or of whom he might encounter. Last year he went off by himself into a region of robbers. He would not take us with him. He was away for a fortnight. When he came back, nothing had happened to him. We thought he was dead, and he was in fine fettle. And he said, "Look how I've been robbed." And he opened up a trunk full of all the treasure belonging to the Cathedral of Embrun, which the robbers had given him. Coming home on that occasion, after I had gone 5 miles out of town with some of his other friends to meet him, I could not help scolding him a little, taking care to speak only when the carriage was rattling so no one else could hear. At first I used to say to myself, there is no danger that deters him, he's impossible. I have ended up getting used to it now. I gestured to Madame Magloire not to cross him. He takes whatever risks he wants to. I go off with Madame Magloire, retire to my room, pray for him, and fall asleep. My mind's at rest because I know if anything were to happen to him, that would be the end of me. I would be on my way to the good Lord with my brother and my bishop. It was much more difficult for Madame Magloire to come to terms with what she calls his recklessness. But now we have got into the habit of it. We both pray, the 2 of us are frightened, and we fall asleep. The devil could enter this house, and no one would stop him. After all, what do we fear in this house? There is always someone with us whose strength is greatest. The devil may visit us, but the good Lord dwells here. For me, that is enough. My brother has no need even to say a word to me now. I understand him without his speaking, and we place ourselves in the hands of Providence. That is how it must be with a man who has greatness of spirit. I asked my brother for the information you wanted about the Defoe family. You know how he knows everything and remembers things because he is still a true royalist. They really are a very old Norman family from the Caen district. Going back 500 years, there was a Raoul Defoe, a Jean Defoe, and a Thomas Defoe, who were noblemen. One of them, the Seigneur de Rochefort. The Seigneur de Rochefort? Rochefort? I don't know how to say it. The last of them was Guy Etienne Alexandre, who was a regimental commander and something or other in the Brittany Light Cavalry. His daughter, Marie-Louise, married Adrien Charles de Gramont, son of Louis d'Oc de Gramont, peer of France, colonel of the French Guards, and lieutenant general of the armed forces. The name is written Faux, Foc, and Fauc. They're probably all faux. Dear Madam, dear Madame, commend us to the prayers of your saintly relative, the Cardinal. As for your dear Sylvanie, she is quite right not to use up any of the brief time she spends with you in writing to me. She is in good health, works as you will have her do, and still loves me. That is all I want. You have conveyed her kind regards. That gives me pleasure. My health is not too bad, and yet I grow thinner every day. Farewell. I've run out of paper, and so must leave you. With very best wishes, Baptistine. P.S. Your sister-in-law is still here with her young family. Your great-nephew is charming. Do you know he will soon be 5 years old? Yesterday he saw a horse go by that had knee guards put on, and he said, "What's wrong with his knees?" That child is so sweet. His little brother pulls an old broom around the house like a cart and says, "Gee up!" As can be seen from the letter, with that special genius that women have of understanding a man better than he understands himself, these two women were able to conform to the bishop's ways. Despite his unfailingly gentle and ingenious manner, the Bishop of Digne sometimes did things that were grand, bold, and magnificent without appearing to be at all aware of it. It made them fearful, but they did not interfere. Sometimes Madame Magloire tried to remonstrate beforehand, but never during or afterwards. They never, by so much as a gesture, intervened in any action once he had embarked on it. At certain times, without needing to be told, when he was probably not even conscious of it himself, so completely unpretentious was he, in some way they sensed he was acting as a bishop. Then they were no more than two shadows in the house. They served him self-effacingly, and if to obey meant to disappear, they disappeared. With an admirable delicacy of instinct, they realized that some shows of concern may be unwelcome. So, even when believing him to be in danger, they understood. I will not say his thinking, but his nature, to the extent that they no longer sought to protect him. They entrusted him to God. Moreover, as we have just read, Baptistine used to say the death of her brother would be the death of her. Madame Magloire did not say so, but she knew it. That ends chapter 9, and I think that brings us to the end of our night. Woo! Last year, July, it's been over a year now, actually. I broke this finger. I stubbed it while at the gym. And it wasn't anything like gory or gruesome. It was more like, that's broken. And it was. And then today, it's fine, but I stubbed this finger. And I was like, they're right next to each other. Come on. And yet, while I've been kind of like adjusting this one, just keeping everything in place and making sure everything's fine about it, This one, the one that I broke before, is giving me all the sympathy pains, so carrying that heavy book certainly didn't help. But hey, thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. You can check us out, if there's still a Twitter, at HotDadReads. We're also on Instagram at HotDadReads, so, whatever floats your boat there. Patreon.com/HotDadReads. This is Twitch.tv/HotDadReads. Basically, if you go to it and you type Hot Dad Reads, you'll find me. It's nice. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that you have a very pleasant evening. More than agreeable, pleasant.